briefly, uh, because I think at times when we have loss like this in our families, friends, it's time to reiterate and to ground ourselves in love and wisdom, compassion and knowledge. Namaste, everybody. I think my friends on Facebook will be able to actually see this one too. And condolences to my family members who just had we've had a significant loss. One of the patriarchs in our family. Um, my own personal belief system on this has come from two traditions. It's come from studying Christianity as well as Tibetan and other forms of Buddhism and Eastern belief systems. Okay, so just so you know up front that what I'm going to share is you don't have to believe it, you don't have to agree with me, you don't have to feel any way about what I'm about to say. Okay, but what I ask is that if you're an open-minded person who's not extremely polar or judgmental, that maybe possibly what I'm going to share, what I'm going to say, based on these traditions, Christianity, Tibetan Buddhism, can bring hope, can bring some sense of peace and solace to people when we've had loss like this in our families, you know, because my own personal life, the only things that have really mattered in times of distress, when I look back, what's made the biggest difference outside of the emotions and the fear and the drama and the terror or whatever I felt in my life during hardships has been when love, compassion, and wisdom finally shine through the chaos. Okay, this is what is this is why I'm physically even here right now. Why I haven't succumbed to the demons of the past that have tried to subjugate me in my life, because the love and the wisdom and compassion does shine through. Um, and I thought about this later in life. The fact that even though we don't read the Bardo Tadal, which is the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is what in Tibet happens when someone dies, is that the belief is that the consciousness definitely does not end at death. Okay, and not only is the belief in Tibet that the consciousness does not end at death, it is believed that the process is similar to what we go through on a daily basis: waking up, going to sleep, going into a sort of comatose state in deep sleep, coming out of that into a REM sleep, and then in REM sleep, not realizing that you're asleep, and sometimes reacting to nightmares versus, you know, sensual dreams, or it could be sort of a neutral, nonsensical, any possibility is there. And if you look into your dreams, you can see that there's not always any order. So sometimes it's a bit chaotic, right? The insight that Tibetans have given us, and it's amazing and it's wonderful and it's beautiful, is that literally the preparation that we need to make outside of our religion for death, the psychological component that we need to focus on while we're living, the insight for that comes from looking at different states of consciousness, not just a near death experience. Okay, that helps as well. But this gives us insight into a possible hypothesis, if you will, about what really happens to what we call us when the physical body ceases to function. Okay, most religions are based on some type of belief in knowledge, wisdom, love, altruism, and compassion being the most important things for a person to um, progress on the spiritual path. Okay. Now, I find it interesting that some people, all of us, at certain points of our journey, if you're atheist, if you're religious, whatever, there seems to be a certain number of people that seem to feel like or believe that those relationships and the relationships that we have that are built on love and that bond we have may be severed at death. Okay, may be severed. Other cultures don't believe that. Okay, one of the things that Tibetan culture does is when they're reading these holy manuscripts at the time of death, and they believe that the soul actually may even remain up to 49 days on this plane, this in between state in Christianity we call purgatory. We call it the bardos in Tibetan Buddhism. It's, bardo means in between, the transition state, because they believe that the soul of a person that has not practiced spirituality in this life, has not mastered self, has not learned to subjugate and not succumb to fears and emotions and discursive sort of bad behaviors, bad habits of thinking. Okay, it is believed that those people, those persons, when they're making the transition from this life to whatever you heaven, purgatory, whatever, different belief systems, right? But it's believed that how you make the transition from this life to the next thing has everything to do with the kind of person you were in this life. Okay. The difference is with other cultures, they get very scientific, they get very specific in the certain type of psychological practices that you need to prepare for the state in which you will no longer have a physical body. Okay. Stay with me, because some of this is going to be so completely outside of what you've heard in Christianity and other traditions that some of y'all are going to be like, oh my God. But I'm just telling you what has been passed down from other traditions for hundreds of years. Okay. Nothing that I made up of my own. Okay. I'm just fortunate to have studied science and psychology, medicine. And so I've always been a bit more open minded, I think, when it comes to possibilities than a person I'm going to say that's not educated. Okay. I'm just going to be honest with you how I feel right now, because we need honesty in times like this. I feel like people that aren't educated and have not been exposed to as much have a very narrow window from which to view reality. Okay. And so the possibilities for them may be very narrow. And I'm not saying that's completely good or completely bad. I'm just going to say that maybe, just possibly, uh, they may struggle a little bit more unnecessarily, because the closed mindedness make, in spiritual practice, closed mindedness is one of the things that generates suffering for us. You know, and one of the greatest times of suffering is when we have loss in our families, and personal loss, any kind of loss, job, marriage, right? Money, health, physical health, all of it, any type of loss, we can see that depending on how we're prepared, it affects us differently, you know. But the Tibetans will do for 49 days. Uh, they have a word for it. It's not punjas, maybe, but I looked this up, and this is similar to what we call prayer in Christianity, and offerings, um, incense burning, meditations, prayers, reading from the Book of the Dead to in the vicinity of the deceased person is thought to be in Tibet of the utmost benefit, because they don't believe in this complete cessation of the consciousness at death. And see, this is where people get tripped up, because in the West we say when you're dead, you're dead. Well, the East, they say when you're dead, you go through that as well, but not. It's not believed to be just this lights on, lights off, nihilistic process. There's stages to it. The stages of being born and dying in the East are thought to occur in every moment, and sleep, death, even the sexual process of union with a and sexual intercourse is thought to be a reflection of all these different states are thought to be a reflection of what happens to the consciousness in other states. Okay, so at a certain stage, according to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, we actually do fall into what you would call sort of a coma. Okay, but just like in the sleeping state, that's not forever. That doesn't last. They even believe that the person that does not cross over properly based on spiritual practice in this life every 7 days will die again, sort of go into this sort of a catatonic comatose state based on the shock of realizing, oh my God, I'm dead. And then, so I could see based on these teachings why certain cultures would have this sort of belief, well, when you're dead, you're dead. There's nothing when you're dead. Yeah, you're right. But not forever, according to other traditions. The impermanence and the transition that you see happening around you, the fact that energy constantly changes, might be a clue. This might be a clue of what happens to the human state of awareness and consciousness after we no longer have a body. It just might be a clue. That's all I'm saying. Based on that, when we say pray for the person that has passed on, remember this person, not with fear and crying and tears, but with joy and love. Keep our thoughts and our aspirations for them pure, you see, because it is believed that the person that has attained some, certainly people that have attained levels of spiritual growth have a different experience when they cross over than a person that's completely untrained, unaware, doesn't believe anything, hasn't prepared through the use through the cultivation of wisdom, love, and compassion. It's like they have a different experience. So it's believed that the mind becomes 7 to 9 times more lucid and clear and aware in the afterlife than in this life. Like I said, this is not stuff that I usually talk about because I think people just can't. They're not ready. But there's always people that are right there. They're right there on the cusp of being ready to open up their minds. And it's for those people that I share these types of beliefs, wisdoms that I've learned in my life, because it's not really about me at the end of the day. Okay. What happens with wisdom and compassion is not really just about me. It's something that has to be shared and given away, and you can't worry about what happens to it when you give it away. You can't focus on the reactions of people's when they hear this type of knowledge and wisdom. You just do what needs to be done. It's like you share your money, you share your sweat, you share your skill in this life for the betterment of others. It's the same way with wisdom and compassion. You share it without worrying about the outcome. That's the way it should be done. Okay. So it is believed in certain traditions that continuing to pray and meditate and listen to wisdom traditions, spiritual readings. They will even get monks to come and pray and give offerings. They call them merit. The merit that from different practices, prayer, meditation, chanting, incense burning. This is thought to be merit that can be given to other people. Of course, we don't fully understand how there's no scientific explanation for this. Some things are beyond what science can explain. But the fact that the person has some level of uh, being that survives the grave, this is why they continue to play well, not play in the West, we probably would play it as a recording, but they read from the book for 49 days, up to 49 days for the person. So really, when you have a belief system like this, when a person moves on, um, the work that we on this side have to do actually doesn't end. We actually can, if you are from a different tradition, continue to practice our spirituality in a certain way. Again, that's not for our benefit, but to cultivate the bond between you and the person that has moved on, and to use the love and wisdom that you have shared with each other, especially if you share the same religion, especially if you share the same family bonds. Those prayers, those meditations, this possible, and I believe they go beyond this realm of existence. They reach out, and they're there as a light to the person um, that has moved on. So I think this type of wisdom and knowledge can help us not feel so helpless. So because in Christianity we believe a person goes on to heaven, and that's not completely different than what's taught in other religions. Some religions say the soul doesn't survive the grave unless it has a relationship with God, who takes the impermanent soul and turns it into a permanent soul. Okay, I've heard this come from a Judeo Christian teaching. Okay, and you can hear elements in that belief in what I just said about the Tibetan belief, how the soul cycles through periods of being completely unaware of its existence, and then the subtle body slowly becomes more aware, awake, and in the Eastern tradition, eventually will manifest as something, you know, as something, whether it be in the realms of heaven, come back to the human realms again, et cetera, et cetera. This is what I'm talking about. But it's believed to be a cyclical process that's not fixed in complete nihilism, also not complete survivability of the personality as it was in this life. You see, because once the body is gone and dissolves, and they call it pristine awareness in Tibet. Once pristine awareness presents itself without a physical body, it's only in their belief system the trained spiritual aspirant who has prayed and meditated and visualized a certain way in his life that's going to be able to benefit from that type of release, release from the physical bonds. You see, it's thought to be a very fortuitous time for people that are prepared, because it is a an uh, hindered, unimpeded view of reality without the physical restraints, you see. But also, what they teach is that because the mind is unrestrained in certain persons who haven't practiced a certain way, uh, there's also the possibility for, and I'm saying this for people that are here right now, alive, that when you don't prepare yourself physically, mentally, and spiritually for what comes next, then the same process that gives you grief in this life, the untrained mind, the undisciplined mind, the lack of concern for others, the lack of altruism, the lack of love for others. So exactly what you need in this, the insight I had one day was exactly what you need to be successful in this life is what you need to be successful in the afterlife. You see, concentration, meditation, prayer, the understanding that the ego is not who we truly are, the lack of responding and being bound to our fear, the fear that is in our subconscious, the fear of the unknown that manifests in our dreaming states, that manifests in our relationships with others, and the reactions that we have towards each other when we don't, you know, do, say what others want. All of this is what hinders us in this life and in the next life. So I wanted to talk about this in a broad way, just in a broad way, not get very specific, but be a little bit specific, because I think, especially from the standpoint of a person trained in the sciences, you know, when I give evidence for something, to me, that's a scientific method. And the fact that I could see a pattern in my life between the waking state, the dreaming state, states that I've been in deep prayer and meditation, what is the point of practicing if those practices don't culminate and turn into wisdom about the nature of myself, the nature of what the soul is? You see, we're in 2021. You know, this is not our exactly our great grandfather's Christianity. This is not our great grandfather's spiritual system, the way they got it. Okay, but at its roots, it has the same basic foundational truths in it. What's the importance of selflessness? What's the importance of love? What's the importance of wisdom? What's the importance of not clinging? They say what holds you back when you move from this life to the next is holding on and clinging. So us praying for the person, hoping that they can move through the next level of existence unafraid, praying to the saints, sending their prayers to their our Lord and Savior if you're Christian. Um, this is what is believed the mind should learn to focus on, more or less, not going into the process with fear, loathing, um, aversion, and attraction, right? The things that hold us back in this life, in the next life, will also hold us back. I know some people are atheists, and that's fine. If you're atheist, I guess you ain't got to really worry about it because you're going to go into a nihilistic hole of nothingness when you leave. And so you really ain't got nothing to worry about. But if you're wrong, then what is possible is that because the consciousness is unbounded at death and can respond to any stray fear or thought at beyond light speed, instantaneously magnifying, creating reality out of pure mind, the reality that is mirrored in our own being, in habits and thoughts. Okay, you see where I'm going with this? Okay, because people live the life right now on some level that they themselves create through their own behaviors, beliefs, and actions. And I don't know why we believe the next level of existence is not going to have some of the same rules that dictate what happens in this level of existence. Maybe it's a lot more subtle. Maybe it's a lot more lucid. Maybe it's a lot more not bound by time and space. Maybe in the next life, think a castle appears in front of you. Who knows? Maybe we co-create the castle together. Any number of infinite possibilities may exist, but because when the mind is unbounded in the dreaming state, if you're lucid, you can create a whole reality and then wake up and not even realize uh, that you did create that reality. Or in certain practices like dream yoga, you are fully aware of the practice that happens when you're asleep. And it's thought that practicing spiritual practices, prayer, meditation in the dreaming state also prepares you for what happens when you're disembodied at death. Okay, that's why practicing continuously is a different form of a different level of spirituality than doing it just once a week, just once every Sunday, just once every Saturday. I think it's a different intensity. It prepares the mind in a much more focused way and intensifies until the insights, the wisdom that are talked about in books like the Bible, it become more clear, and the practice changes. It doesn't become so much about what others are doing to me, what I want. It becomes more and more about that inner journey that everybody's running from on some level. Because when you go deep in, there's just as much darkness as there is light, and that scares people. But to be scared of that darkness and be reactionary towards it does not benefit us as we make the transition. So I hope I really hope these words and this type of wisdom benefits somebody. It helps somebody, study, pray, and meditate with a more open perception and more possibilities for for how incomprehensibly just mind-bogglingly beautifully complex God's universe really is. You know, because I don't put limits the way some people do on the exact details of how, God created this universe or the processes via which the mind that he, she, it created operates. I don't do that because I've seen through my own studies, my own life, how complex the process is. And you can spend a whole lifetime studying one aspect of it and not grasp that. You can spend your whole life studying cerebral cortex, the cerebellum, the pons, the brainstem, the peripheral nervous system, autonomic nervous system. Then you could take that to another system like the Eastern system of yoga, where they talk about subtle energies and nadis and chakra systems, and you're still actually on some level probably talking about the nervous system, but in a way that modern science and modern man can't comprehend. But somewhere at some point in time, using the most exquisite tool that was ever created by this universe, the human mind, somebody looked and figured these things out. So the process of using faith and not just what we understand and what we cling to is also a spiritual process. But every person has to go on that journey for themselves, and they have to be honest about where they're at and about what they're willing to sacrifice to gain that type of insight and really practice it, put foot to ground and move. You see, that's the process. Wisdom and practice have to become one thing, and then these insights aren't so much big revelations, ground shaking. It's like, yeah, that's how reality is set up. It's pretty cool. It's it's almost like Matrix, but not exactly like that. And the fact that that's even a possibility, uh, like it really changes the way you approach life. You know, because you can approach it from a more rigid, materialist sort of process, and I think things have to kind of knock you in the head like a hammer before you believe it. But that's not. Things don't always knock you in the head like a hammer. Sometimes they have to be, um, looked at from a non-hammer viewpoint for them to not look like a hammer, for everything not to look like that. It has to be viewed from the standpoint of not even being a tool anymore. You see, because even that's a concept. There's a process of letting go. That also is necessary when we move on. Letting go, not clinging, not being attached. You know, being being aware that our journey here, that we did our best, that we fought the good fight, as we say. So, all right, I'm gonna end this one here. I'm not even sure if this broadcast is going all the way through. I think it is, but I'm not. I'm not on. I think I'm on the Wi-Fi, so hopefully it wasn't blocked. But you guys be blessed. Namaste, and remember, we live in a beautiful, eternal now moment, and it's something that is really beyond the human mind to fully understand. But that mystery, I think, also brings a certain beauty to it. It brings a profound deepness and beauty to it. Being able to, step off the edge of the cliff and be okay because you're not worried about what's at the bottom, so to speak. Just stepping off the cliff is for most of us, it may never happen. And it may take just the utmost faith. And what's up, Alfred? What's up? Namaste, man. It takes a lot of faith to step off the cliff edge without fear, you know, which is another analogy for death. When we're forced, when we get pushed off the edge. So, you may want to do some base jumping and practice if you know it's going to be something that you have to do at some point in time. You may want to, get a bat, get a wingsuit, get a parachute, do some base jumping, and then you get to the edge of the cliff. It's not so much of a chaotic, uncontrolled, fear-based, oh me, oh my process, right? Which is, I think, for most people when they move Some people, when they wake up, when they move from moment to moment, it's a chaotic process. So of course, at the time of death, it's going to be the same way. Uh, the book that I recently finished reading that gave me the inspiration to do this podcast was called "Preparing for Death." It's based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, um, and it's things that I've already studied, but it really put it in a very practical framework, talking about things like, have a living will, have 5 wishes filled out before we, let people know what you want before you move on. Things like, you can even, I didn't know this, you could pay for your own, if you really want, if you have issues with money when you die, did you know you could pay for your own casket? And by law, the funeral homes have to accept that. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Like, some people, when people pass on, they're worried about money, and they're worried about not being able to afford things. You can even pay for, you could find certain lands that are legal to put people on and bury people on, family lands. You can have your own casket paid for. You can actually have the service done the way you want it. And cremation, you can actually cremate people in a casket that you yourself have paid for and bought on, even on Amazon. Like, all these things I didn't realize before I read this book. Like, wow, like we've turned death into over here like a business, and it's way jacked up in price. And there's so many things that I think we all push to the back of our minds. You know, getting our affairs in order, having our living will, and durable power of attorneys, letting people know where our finances are at, where our passwords are at for our bank accounts, what kind of insurance policies we really have, what kind of service do we really want? Do we want something that's not, centralized with everybody around? You kind of want just your small little memorial service. All these different things that I've thought about, but after I finished reading this book, I was like, man, yeah, we need to, you know, we all, especially now with the pandemic, we all would need to sit and think about this and be like, I need to put something down on paper. It's not morbid, especially if you practice meditative spirituality. Thinking about death daily is nothing more than a motivation for us to live our life at the deepest level possible, you see. Because it says that, you know, uh, the big fight is tomorrow. Are you ready? It's kind of like that. And if you're sitting there and you flabby, and you got a big pot belly, and you finna get in the ring, you probably not prepared. You probably need to meditate on the proper way to lose. There's still a path for you. There's still a practice that you need, but that path would be, well, you got one day for the fight. You better focus on the proper way to lose, so that you don't completely take the big L. Right? Because that is something that is talked about. What happens if we die suddenly? You know, what type of spiritual practices will help us? Because none of us know, and we all think we're prepared. And if you look at certain things in our life that have happened to us, certain things that have shocked us, certain things that have happened suddenly, we all can probably relate to, what happens when we're caught unawares. You know, and it's not something that I myself care to nurture. In other words, going into some of the most important moments of my life unprepared, whether it be marriage, whether it be bringing children into the world, birth, death, right? You know, being of aid to other people at the most critical times in their life. All these things are extremely important, and they all require certain types of preparation if we're going to be of the utmost use to others, ourselves, and utilizing the highest level of skill, which you would want for a surgeon. You want a surgeon to have at each moment the highest level of skill available, humanly possible, right? When they crack open your chest, when they crack open your brain, when they do an appendectomy, doesn't matter, do an ingrown toenail. They expect and want the highest level of skill. We should also expect that for ourselves, but we shouldn't be naive when we look at what's really taught about this life and the next life, and everything in between. It is one of the most incomprehensibly complex processes, yet it is a process that is grounded in grace, compassion, wisdom, and love, those things are available more so, more so if we have spent a whole lifetime preparing using those tools, wisdom and compassion, and not just at the last minute say, oh man, I got to fight tomorrow. I better do 10 push-ups. I better do a couple of barbell, curls and get, hit the bag for about 10 minutes. Like, you probably not go, probably not gonna be all right in that ring, bro. you might want to, you might want to not even step into the ring, but you have to, right? And then in the case of moving from transitioning, you have to. You have no choice. And what helps me is to understand that the process is not any different than what I do every day. At the end of the day, there's a saying that if you prepare constantly, whenever whenever the big fight happens, so to speak, you don't have to think. You don't have to spend a lot of time burning brain cells on what to do. You just do what you've always done. You keep your mind and your heart focused on the things that you spent your whole life focusing on. In the case of a spiritual aspirant, it's compassion, wisdom, and love, selfless service to others, right? Not being bounded by ego. Those are the things that you focus on. So it's no different. And it sounds simple, but it really takes a lifetime of practice and contemplation before you realize that moving between levels of existence, the process is completely grounded in the same insights, the same wisdom, regardless if you're on this side of the water or already across the other shore. It's still grounded in the same wondrous spirit of love and wisdom that brought this universe into existence, right? So, all right, on that note, I'm out of here. Namaste. God bless.